Welcome back, everyone. Today we're doing something a little different. A deep dive into the life and personality of Anton Bruckner. And, obviously we know Bruckner is a composer, but
Of course.
we're going way beyond the music. We want to get into who he was as a person. And
Right.
we're really lucky because we have some excerpts from a biography written by someone who actually knew Bruckner.
Oh, wow.
So it's not just like a dry recounting of facts. It's
Right, a first-hand account.
Exactly. So it's like we were getting a really personal glimpse into his world. And
That's exciting. I mean, think about it. This biography doesn't start off, like a list of achievements or
Right.
anything like that. It starts with a story, like a very human picture of Bruckner. And it actually starts with the author's own childhood memory of meeting Bruckner.
Oh, wow. Okay, so set the scene for me. What was his first impression like?
Well, you have to imagine you're a child, and you're about to meet this world-famous composer.
Right, the anticipation.
You'd probably picture, someone elegant, sophisticated. But
Right.
the author describes Bruckner as showing up in these rustic clothes, almost out of place,
Hmm.
And he had these awkward, kind of naive manners.
It's funny because it's like you think of these genius composers, and you think of Beethoven, this
Larger than life figure.
exactly, larger than life, and then you have someone like this who's
So unassuming.
yeah. It's a good reminder that you can't judge a book by its cover, I guess.
Absolutely. And that contrast, I think, between his simple demeanor and the power of his music, it's something the author really emphasizes. It sets the tone for the whole biography.
It's like the genius hiding in plain sight, right? Speaking of setting one place that keeps coming up is St. Florian.
Oh, yes.
It seems like it was way more than just a location for Bruckner.
St. Florian's where he was born, where his musical journey began, and where he's buried.
Hmm.
But it was more than that. The author describes it as a sanctuary for him,
Oh, wow.
a place connected to his faith and creativity.
Well, and as we all know, Bruckner was a devout Catholic, and
Right.
St. Florian with its magnificent abbey, it
Awe-inspiring.
must be held this incredible spiritual resonance for him.
And I think you can hear that peace and spirituality in his music.
Yeah.
Almost like it's woven into the fabric of the sound.
It makes you wonder if he found those musical ideas in the quiet moments he spent at St. Florian, surrounded by
That sense of the sacred.
that sense of the yeah, okay. Yeah, so we have this very intriguing character deeply connected to this almost sacred place. But his path to becoming a composer, that was not a straight line, was it?
No, not at all. It's pretty roundabout, actually.
Really?
Yeah, he started as a school teacher,
Which makes sense.
given his humble beginnings for sure. But
Yeah.
what's fascinating is that even after he began to have success as a composer, he still really craved this stability.
Oh,
He
interesting.
wanted a bureaucratic position.
Almost like he didn't fully trust the music to sustain him.
I think that's a great point, and not just practically, but maybe even creatively.
Right.
He couldn't quite believe in it fully.
Wow.
It wasn't until much later in life that he really dedicated himself completely to composing. And that's a very, very late start compared to a lot of composers who, they often just know from a very young age.
Right, they're prodigies or...
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so that late start, it makes you think how that shaped his music.
Of course.
Because, those years spent seeking stability, working in structured environments, maybe that's what gave his music that...
Architectural grandeur.
Exactly, that sense of order, the complexity that you hear in his symphonies.
Absolutely. I think that's a very insightful connection.
Okay, so we've got this unique path to music, but we can't ignore this other crucial element of Bruckner's life, his Catholic faith.
Absolutely central to who he was as a person and an artist.
And it must have deeply influenced the way he approached music.
The author points out that in Bruckner's Austria, the church,
Right.
it was a powerful force. It shaped almost every aspect of life.
And for Bruckner, it wasn't just about Sunday service, it was...
It was woven into his daily existence.
Yeah.
He even considered becoming a priest.
Oh, wow.
At one point in his life, and there's this great anecdote in the book,
Okay.
whenever the church bells rang for vespers, Bruckner would stop everything he was doing,
No matter what.
no matter how engrossed he was in his work.
It's like he saw music as an extension of his prayer life.
Yes, a way to give praise through sound.
And that must resonate deeply with you as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so we've got these foundational pieces of Bruckner, his humble beginnings, his deep faith, and his unusual path to music.
Right.
But his journey specifically as a symphonist, well, it wasn't smooth sailing, was it?
No, not at all.
What were some of the challenges he faced?
Well, he was an incredibly talented organist. He gained international recognition for his performances.
Yeah.
But when it came to composing symphonies, he really struggled
To find his voice.
to find his voice and gain acceptance.
And then enters Richard Wagner.
Ah, yes, Wagner.
Huge influence, I imagine.
The author describes the experience of Bruckner hearing Wagner's operas Tannhäuser and Tristan and Isolde as like a musical awakening for him.
I mean, Wagner's music, it was so radical, so emotionally
It
charged.
was revolutionary.
You can imagine the impact it must have had on someone like Bruckner.
But that deep admiration for Wagner, it also caused some problems for Bruckner.
Oh, how so?
Well, some critics, especially those in the Bronze camp,
Okay.
they saw him as just imitating Wagner.
So not his own voice.
Right, and the premiere of Bruckner's Third Symphony,
Oh, yeah.
described as a complete disaster.
Ouch. I mean, can you imagine pouring your heart and soul into a piece?
Years of work?
Yeah, and then just having it rejected so harshly.
It must have been devastating.
It's a good reminder that even for geniuses like Bruckner, the path to recognition isn't always easy.
Right, it's rarely a straight line.
So what do we have so far? We have this devout, almost naive man, deeply inspired by his faith and surroundings, but struggling to find his place in the world of music.
A bit of an enigma, wouldn't you say?
It seems like there's more to him than meets the eye, right?
The author really dives into that complexity,
Uh-huh.
describing Bruckner as humble, awkward, almost childlike in his naivete. But
Yeah.
then his music, it's anything but simple.
Yeah.
It's powerful, innovative, and so full of emotion.
It's an integral contradiction. How can someone so outwardly simple create music of such depth?
That's the Bruckner enigma.
Yeah.
And it's what makes him so compelling. And, the author uses a lot of anecdotes to show these contrasting sides of Bruckner,
I love a good anecdote.
like his teaching style at the Vienna Conservatory.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about this. Tell me about that.
So imagine learning about these complex harmonic progressions
Right.
through analogies to everyday life.
Really?
Yeah, he'd relate musical concepts to things like family dynamics or the workings of nature.
It's a very different approach.
Unconventional, but apparently very effective.
Wow. So not just a brilliant composer, but a gifted teacher as well.
Exactly, someone who could make even the most complex ideas accessible.
And that brings us to the music itself.
To really understand Bruckner, we need to dive into the sounds he created.
Let's do it.
Bruckner's music, it's an experience. It's not just,
Yeah.
background music.
It's visceral, it grabs you.
The author talks about how it's not just telling a story, it's evoking these profound emotions, a sense of transcendence. Like listening to it is a spiritual practice.
And we know how central faith was to Bruckner. Do you hear that reflected in the actual music, the sounds themselves?
Oh, absolutely. There's this recurring sense of liberation in his music, like a release from earthly burdens and a striving for the divine, almost like he's using music to reach for something beyond human comprehension.
Wow.
It reminds me of his Te Deum, those soaring melodies, and he actually described that piece as a prayer to God.
That's beautiful. As someone who shares Bruckner's faith, I can only imagine how powerfully that must connect with you.
It's like you hear the struggle, the doubt, but then these moments of hope and faith just break through.
Yeah, the author mentioned something that really intrigued me. They talk about German Michael as this representative figure in Bruckner's Eighth Symphony. Can you explain what that means?
Sure. So German Michael in folklore, he's this hardworking everyman figure representing honesty and perseverance.
Okay.
But he's also known for being a bit clumsy, maybe even naive.
Oh, so just like Bruckner.
Exactly. Remember how the author described him humble, awkward, almost childlike?
Right?
And yet, like German Michael Bruckner possessed this inner strength, this determination. And you hear that in the music, those grand melodies, powerful crescendos, the sheer scale of his symphonies.
It's like he's saying, don't underestimate me. I may not fit your mold, but I have something important to say.
And that something is rooted in his faith, his connection to nature, this belief in music's power to lift us up.
Right.
We've talked about Wagner's influence. Do you hear that in the actual composition and the notes themselves?
You definitely hear it in the use of chromatic harmony, those richer, more complex chords that create that sense of yearning.
Yeah.
And the way he uses leitmotifs, these recurring themes that represent specific ideas, just like Wagner did in his operas.
Right. But it's not just imitation. Bruckner takes those techniques and makes them his own. His symphonies have this incredible sense of architecture,
Yes, this monumental quality that's just so Bruckner.
And I love how his music moves between those moments of quiet reflection and then bursts of ecstatic energy.
Yeah, it's like this whole range of human emotion captured in sound.
Speaking of human emotion, I want to go back to this idea of the Bruckner enigma. This contrast between his simplicity and the profound depth of his music. Do you think those two things are connected?
I do. I think so. I mean, what if Bruckner's unconventional journey, those years spent seeking stability outside of music, what if those struggles actually fueled his creativity?
It's fascinating to think about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe if he had followed a more traditional path, become more, polished and sophisticated, his music wouldn't have this raw, honest quality that's so captivating.
It's like through music, he was able to express these emotions that he maybe couldn't articulate in words. That vulnerability, that rawness, it's part of what makes his music so powerful.
It reminds us that artistic genius, it can come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes it's the things that make us different, the things we might see as weaknesses that become our strengths.
And for those of us who find strength in faith, that message is really powerful.
It is.
It's a reminder that even in our imperfections, even in our struggles, there's beauty and meaning to be found.
Okay, so we've explored the man that influences the music, but I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
Yeah, what else should we consider?
Well, we've touched on it, but we haven't fully explored this idea of transcendence in his music, this reaching for something beyond the earthly realm.
And that's what we'll dive into next. So this idea of transcendence in Bruckner's music, it's almost like he's creating this sonic bridge, between the earthly and the divine.
Yeah, the author talks about it as this yearning for something beyond the here and now.
Yeah.
And you hear it not just in the melodies, but the way he builds to these incredible climaxes, these moments of pure ecstasy, almost like a glimpse into eternity.
You know what it reminds me of?
What's that?
The architecture of a Gothic cathedral.
Oh.
With those towering arches and the stained glass windows, filtering the light.
Yeah, creating that sense of awe and wonder.
Exactly. And Bruckner's music, it has that same effect. It's reaching for the heavens, striving for something beyond us.
And for you, someone whose faith is so central, I can only imagine how deeply that must resonate.
Oh, it's incredibly moving. It's like he's giving voice to those longings that are so hard to put into words. The desire for connection, for meaning, for something greater than ourselves.
And we've talked about St. Florian, that spiritual anchor for Bruckner.
Right?
I wonder if there's a connection there, too.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe those feelings of transcendence in his music are rooted in the awe he felt within the walls of that abbey.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's like those sacred spaces, they imprinted themselves on his soul.
Right, shaping the way he heard and created music.
But even with this yearning for the divine, his music isn't all, light and serenity.
No.
There's a real sense of struggle there, too.
Oh, absolutely.
You hear it in the dissonance, those clashes of harmony that create tension and unease.
It's like he's acknowledging the darkness, the doubt, even as he reaches for the light.
And that's what makes his music so human, so relatable. It's not just blind faith. It's about those big questions, confronting the mysteries of life and death.
And remember, we talked about the premiere of his Third Symphony, that disaster.
Oh, yeah. That must have been crushing.
But he didn't give up.
Right.
He kept composing, kept refining his craft, and I think that speaks volumes about his character.
It's like his music is this testament to perseverance. This belief that even when faced with setbacks, we can keep striving for something meaningful.
And for those who find solace in their faith, that message is really powerful.
Absolutely. A reminder that doubt and struggle are part of the human experience, even for the devout.
Yeah, and maybe it's through that struggle, that confrontation with darkness, that we find our way to a deeper understanding.
Of ourselves and our relationship with the divine.
Just like Bruckner did through his music.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think what stands out is that Bruckner's music is more than just notes on a page.
Yeah.
It's an invitation to experience something profound.
To connect with those deeper longings within ourselves.
To explore faith, doubt, beauty, transcendence, all through the power of sound.
So go listen, explore his symphonies, his masses, his choral works, and as you listen, pay attention to those moments that transport you, that lift you up, and give you a glimpse of something beyond the everyday.
Because in those moments, you might just discover something about yourself, about your faith, and about the power of music to connect us to something greater than ourselves.
That brings us to the end of our deep dive. Until next time.